delighted to welcome everyone to the Save Tolka Park campaign launch this evening. Really pleased to see so many people present and on board and supporting the campaign so far. In terms of the running order for this evening, we are delighted to welcome a lot of guest speakers. So we have Eamon Dunphy, who you can see there, will be first up. Una Mullally will deliver a message, and then we will have the presentation itself from the Save Tolka Park campaign delivered by John Marnock and Lee Daly. Following that, we've Enda McHugh from the Community Action Tenants Union, which I'm delighted to say are on board. And then we have a local resident, Elaine Donnelly, who lives in the area in Drumcondra. She's a social worker in the area. And then I'm delighted to say we've Brendan Menton and Frank Connolly from Home Farm in Drumcondra, who have pledged their support to the campaign, which again is really brilliant to see. And then we'll wrap up this evening's presentation with David Balfe and Pam Connolly, two musical artists with a strong connection to Tolka Park as well. And then we will open the floor to Q&As. We are due to kind of wrap up around 8:30. So by all means, the format for the questioning, if you could type it in the Q&A box at the bottom, and then I will relay questions to the steering group. So that's kind of the lay of the land for this evening. So yeah, as I said, listen, thanks so much for logging on this evening for the Save Tolka Park campaign public launch. For anyone who doesn't know, Save Tolka Park is a coalition of local residents, football fans and activists who are concerned at the possibility of yet another Dublin institution falling into the hands of private developers and thus being consigned to history. It is with great pleasure I can say officially we have letters of support from both Drumcondra AFC and Home Farm football clubs, as well as an outpouring of support from local businesses, some really positive feedback and engagement with community groups such as Ballybock Pride of Place, Marino, and some well wishes from the Drumcondra Triangle Residents Association as well. So the Save Tolka Park campaign is made up of a broad spectrum of society, artists, sports stars, politicians, videographers, graphic designers, public servants, photographers, butchers, bakers, the whole lot. This is a community project. It is based on the principle of public land for public use. We, as Dubliners, cherish the rich, layered tapestry of centuries of life, preserved but still across our great town. We must treat this precious and finite asset with great care. And Tolka Park itself has hosted many thousands of football matches. The famous racehorse Arkle was paraded on the hallowed turf in 1966. The music group The Dubliners even played a match in Tolka. This historic venue has hosted National Cup finals along with international matches, both Champions League and UEFA Cup qualifiers, as well as some notable UEFA under-17 European Championships more recently in 2019. So Tolka Park brought light to the League of Ireland, quite literally. You know, as noted by Rory Croke in the Irish Times, Tolka Park hosted the first ever Irish floodlit football match in 1953. So Tolka Park is a great asset. It's irreplaceable in terms of value to our city. It ushers in an attitude of retro is beautiful, yet flirts for a modern kiss of love to complete it. It deserves our care, our attention, our passion, our love, our work, and our dedication. And over the coming weeks and indeed months, I sincerely hope that our combined efforts reap the just rewards of ensuring Tolka Park remains in public ownership and remains a sports facility owned by the people, for the people, and utilised by the whole community of Marino and Drumcondra and beyond, to create a positive and healthy local environment for many, many years to come. Tolka Park is irreplaceable. Our historic sites are a finite resource. Once Tolka Park is gone, there the story ends. Neither it nor the deep social and personal histories that live there today can be resurrected. We must not repeat the mistakes of the past, which saw great historic sites, the fabric of the city's story, discarded in the name of short-term gains for the few. Today, Tolka Park is at the forefront of that battle, and we believe it can be at the forefront of the Drumcondra community and an asset to residents for this current generation and also for our children and future generations. It would be cultural vandalism to consign this stadium with so much community potential to history. And speaking of history, I'd like to welcome our first speaker for this evening, Mr. Eamon Dunphy.
Thanks very much, Shane. It's a pleasure to be here in support of Save Tolka Park. I grew up just yards from it, and for the first 15 years of my life, it was huge. It was an integral part of my life. and indeed my family's life, my brother, myself. My father worked there as a steward, and I saw the first floodlit match in 1953. I didn't realize I was 8 at the time, and St. Mirren were the opposition, and it was a dazzling experience. It's very important for the area, and I am conscious that housing and accommodation is needed, but I don't think that selling Tolka Park to a private investment company is the way to go. I think Tolka Park is an amenity that should be preserved. It is iconic, and many people have this in their DNA, memories of Tolka Park and what it means to that community. And as Shane has said, these things are very important, and we shouldn't cast them aside recklessly or heedlessly. So I support the campaign. Perhaps it would be different if the housing or the facility that's going to be built there was affordable, social housing for people. But as things stand, I support the campaign, and I support him with the fondest of memories and a real understanding of what that ground means to the local community.
Brilliant stuff, Eamon. Thanks so much for that contribution. Really shows the meaning of Tolka Park to so many locals. So genuinely, thanks so much for that, Eamon. Next up, unfortunately, I did mention Una Mullally. She wasn't able to make it this evening, but I did have a chance to catch up with her a bit earlier on this afternoon, and we can play a message from Una now.
Thanks a million for having me. It's really good to be speaking as part of something like this. And I think, first of all, it's just so obvious to me how compelling the argument is to save Tolka Park. Dublin has an amenities crisis as well as a housing crisis. We have a public space crisis and we have a recreational space crisis. And when amenities are gone, they're gone. Now, that's not to say that there aren't, small pockets of things coming up often as part of much bigger developments that actually squeeze the original recreational or green space or potential space that existed before they're built. But it is infinitely harder to get new public space and new amenities and new recreational areas over the line than it is to preserve what we already have. When you look at the struggle, for example, in Dublin 8 that has happened with how long it has taken to get even small little parks over the line, it's really a struggle when you lose this kind of stuff. And when you look at the potential in a place like Tolka Park, when you look at what that means to the community, when you look at its historical importance, and when you look at, what could be done as opposed to what could be given away, you can really see where the value lies. This is something that I've been writing about for, well over a decade at this stage, in terms of the direction of the city and what is being foregrounded and what is being preserved and what is being viewed as important and what is being viewed as an asset or a piece of land to speculate on. And we've seen what has happened in the city centre with regards to this kind of drive that emerged from the crash, really, and the land speculation and the kind of disaster capitalism that emerged from that. And the impact of those policies are very well documented. In fact, we are living in the mess that they created. But when you look at the city centre, for example, what has happened has been a complete disregard for the value beyond monetary of spaces for people to convene, to build community, to have community, and to participate in culture, be that sport, music, art, skateboarding, whatever that is. So what we see is that the kind of thin end of the wedge that has less political capital, for example, people who have nightclubs or DIY spaces or artist studios, a tremendous amount of that has just been demolished. And what it has been replaced with does not serve the character or community of a capital city. It has been replaced with apart hotels. It has been replaced with hotels. It has been replaced with purpose-built student accommodation that people basically can't afford. And what we're seeing now is that the bigger assets, I suppose, this is a terrible term, but the bigger community assets are now also under threat. This is what we're seeing with a space like Tolka Park potentially being just handed over or sold off to a private developer. It's really important to remember that public land belongs to the public. It belongs to the people. And we really have to be wary about how the language around the housing crisis is actually kind of being co-opted by corporate and hyper-capitalist interests to serve this kind of profit-seeking, developer-led building. And that's kind of already preying on a city that is already vulnerable to these profit-squeezing exercises. So what we're seeing now is this narrative take over, that where once people were demanding public housing and that was being denied, now what we're being told is, no, this has to be housing, this has to be this, as if that response is an answer to an authentic demand, when in actual fact, what it's doing is allowing investment funds, REITs, cookie funds, or whatever you want to call them, to take this land that is the city's land and build essentially unaffordable housing on it. We need housing, of course, but we also really, really, really need amenities, and we need recreation space. And it's very disingenuous, I think, and very myopic to use this, and quite nefarious actually, to use the current housing crisis that we're in as leverage to extract public land from the people through the proxy of the council and hand it over to private developers who absolutely do not have the interests of communities at heart. And why would they? It's not their job to do that. It's their job to make money. So yes, we need housing, but we also need communities to thrive. We need decent planning, and we need long-term thinking, and we need beautiful and accessible public space and amenities for all. So from where I'm standing and looking at this in kind of a long-term analysis, I suppose, is that Tolka Park is not just a thing. It's not just a site to demolish or get rid of or replace. It's not just a site for developers to speculate on. And not only that, but the council has shown itself to be pretty bad, I suppose, at getting good deals. And so kind of what we're seeing across the city is a social displacement of primarily working class communities in particular, and their areas gentrified and no longer able to live or rent where they grew up or where they want to be, where their families are, where their friends are, and so on. And that too goes for these amenities, these great amenities like Tolka Park, where the potential is being ignored, and there's no sense of the need to preserve. I think the development of Dalymount Park is a really good idea, but just because you're developing one thing, that doesn't mean that has to be the only thing. There is loads of room actually for many, many more amenities to be strengthened, to be redeveloped, to be made better, and to be preserved. You know, ultimately, when it comes to a cost issue, you know, there's an argument for saying, like, who cares what it costs when the value of what it provides is just so much more. It would certainly cost less than the more kind of harebrained plans around amenities that have coalesced. For example, the whitewater rafting facility in Dublin 1 that nobody really wants. So when you already have something, when you don't actually have to rebuild or make a new or buy a site to develop an amenity on, then why would you get rid of that? I also think it's important to kind of poke a hole in the narrative that something like demolishing a grounds, demolishing an amenity and utilizing it for housing is somehow progressive. Like, I'm not against progress, but demolishing Tolka Park is not progressive. It's actually quite regressive. And I'm not against development, but taking an amenity away from a community is not development. It's certainly not positive development. And I think that I suppose the idea of sustainability is really missing from the broader conversation that we're having about the housing crisis at the moment, because sustainability is not just about environmental concerns or about being, climate sensitive. It's actually about the sustainability in terms of the long-term cohesion of a place, what resources are available to people there when housing is built around it, where people can play, where people can convene, where people can have a good time. Those things are really, really, really important. And you don't need me or anyone else to talk about how the last year or so has really revealed how vital public space and public amenities are. So, character, connection, community, these things are priceless. They're invaluable, and they provide meaning in a world increasingly stripped of it. So, when we talk about these kind of things, it's not about trying to hold on to something or for the sake of it, or to block development for the sake of it. This place exists. It's important. It holds tremendous meaning. It is vital for the community, and the potential is within realizing what it actually could be in a broader sense for the community that lives in the area, that moves to the area, that comes to the area. And it's just a vital amenity and resource, and it should be saved.
Really invaluable contribution both from Eamon and from Una. So moving on, we can have now, I suppose, the main proposal around the Save Tolka Park campaign. So the presentation of our proposal and how we plan to go about refurbishing Tolka Park and saving Tolka Park will be presented by Lee Daly and John Murnock, two of the Save Tolka Park campaign steering group members.
Thanks very much, Shane. Thanks, Lee. As Shane, Eamon and Una have already touched on, just to reiterate the history of football in Tolka Park, it dates back to 1924, includes being home to the great drum side of the 40s, 50s and 60s, home farm, Shamrock Rovers, and now, of course, Shelbourne. Also, as I said earlier, it was Republic of Ireland's first floodlit stadium and our first all-senior football stadium. It's hosted men's and women's internationals, underage, Great League of Ireland nights, FAI senior and junior cup finals, and nights of European glory, never to be forgotten. But more than just football, it's a stadium of rich sporting heritage, from boxing bouts to Arkle, to the Harlem Globetrotters, and to Rugby League World Cup internationals. And to learn more about this long history, I recommend visiting our website, which has just gone live, which is savetolkapark.com. And on there, there's a catalogue of articles on the site of this invaluable heritage. This history should not be dismissed. So one of our country's greatest ever footballers, John Giles, said in his autobiography, Tolka is a spiritual home. And as a stadium to this day, it is very special to so many. Moving on to the present. So the land is currently both public land and is zoned as a recreational open green space amenity. We believe it should remain so. Our campaign is not anti-Dalymount. So Dalymount, like Tolka, is an important stadium in Irish football and should absolutely be preserved. But it is undeniable, given the plans for Dalymount are reliant on funds from the sale of Tolka, the futures of both stadiums are inextricably linked. With regards to the Dalymount project, the estimated costs have nearly doubled and the capacity has almost halved. So the plan has been downgraded from a Category 4 to a Category 3 stadium. And the Save Tolka Park campaign believes that this is not value for money and it's time that the project was re-examined. Ultimately, we support a realistic and modest refurbishment of both stadiums, that both are kept in public hands, so that both stadiums can serve the community for men and women, adults and children, senior and junior football. We believe two refurbishments rather than one full demolition and new build is better use of public funds and would be cost neutral, or at least very close to it, to the taxpayer. On that basis, ours is an honest and realistic proposal. Our case for the retention of Tolka revolves around the following three key principles. public land for public use, sustainable development of communities, and sporting and community potential. Firstly, public land for public use. This principle is a key foundation of our campaign. So following the Dublin City Council Chief Executive's plans to sell various parcels of public land, including Tolka, councillors directed the Chief Executive to return with case-by-case justification for sales. There are recent examples where councillors rejected the sale of public land, and we are confident we can make a strong case in lobbying to ensure the sale of Tolka Park by DCC is similarly opposed. And look, we believe the mood music is changing. There's a heightened public discourse regarding concerns potential sale of public land, especially public green space that can be a huge community asset. So in order to abide by the principles they have set themselves, councillors must oppose the sale of Tolka, and we'll be strongly making this case over the weeks and months ahead. Our second key principle is around the sustainable development of communities. So numerous areas of green space have been built on or are due to be built on in the local area. We provide several examples of this in our proposal. Large-scale development with little social return is depriving the area of badly needed amenities. And we feel a refurbished Tolka would give the area huge social return through facilities such as a gym, creche, cafe, enterprise centre, public toilets. The options are limited, as well as potential access to the River Tolka through a public access route. And we believe this would deliver the most inclusive, accessible and community-focused stadium in the country. We have the support of many local residents, and we've been engaging with local residents groups and will continue to do so, including local business as well, local clubs, which I'll touch on later. We strongly believe this proposal is a better alternative from the perspective of local residents than the probable outcome being a high-rise, unaffordable development on this land in an area that already has congestion issues. We also believe a multi-purpose stadium for sporting and community amenities for use by residents, including adults and children, would be more appealing to most residents. We've had some initial extremely positive engagements with these residents groups, many of which are here tonight, and are keen to hear more about our plans. And look, being honest, we understand some residents in the immediate vicinity of the stadium may be nervous about this, and we want to engage further on this after tonight to explain our vision in more detail. And we don't claim that this is the only solution, but we want to facilitate an informed conversation about what can be possible. Our last key principle is around sporting and community potential. So in order for the current plans for Tolka to progress, Dublin City councillors would have to vote to rezone the land. So this is crucial to everything and it's not a done deal. We'll be tirelessly campaigning for the land to remain zoned as it is now, as a recreational open green space amenity. Further to this, Dublin City Council's own development plan, 2016-2022, specifically supports the continuation of sports clubs and facilities. I think as many of you will know, playing field space is lacking in this area, particularly the further you venture towards the city centre from Tolka Park. And as Una touched on, we need to hold on to the diminishing recreational green space that we have. So in our vision for Tolka, we would advocate for a hybrid playing surface, which allows for significantly greater playing time than a grass surface. Many junior and schoolboy clubs in the area have inadequate resources. We've been positively engaging with a number of clubs and will continue to do so. We already have endorsements by way of letters of support from Drumcondra AFC and Home Farm FC. And they're both clubs with long-lasting associations with Tolka and are key clubs in the community, representative of large sections of the local area. We also feel that Tolka is currently really underutilised and should no longer be limited to its current use as just a home for a League of Ireland club. In that note, the stadium belongs to the people of this city and it should be treated as such. I'm going to pass it to Lee now. We'll talk through the detailed proposal of what we see as the future of Tolka Park. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much to John for his presentation there. I'll just present it again and just take us back through the rest of it. So here we're going to present our vision for a refurbished Tolka Park. It's a high quality UEFA Category 3 stadium. At one point, it was envisaged to be a Category 4 stadium. Category 4 is what you need to play in the group stages of the Champions League. And obviously when Dundalk managed to reach the group stage of the Europa League, they were able to use the Aviva for that. So, you know, it's important, I think, to bear in mind that, you know, this is an appropriate facility for the level of football we have in this country. Obviously, we want to have ambition and drive on more, but also there is significant headroom for Irish football to grow without necessarily having to have 2 teams in the group stage of the Champions League at all times. So the new Tolka Park, we feel, could offer a gym, creche, cafe, enterprise centre and public toilets. You know, we've already heard that Tolka Park has done so much for the city and what it's offered to the city. But we feel, and we are very conscious, that Tolka Park should go further and should provide more. It's not just enough, we think, for it to be just a football stadium. Really, we have to embed football clubs and football stadiums within their local communities. So John talked already about gym, creche, cafe, enterprise centre and public toilets. There's a potential for that in our proposal, and we'll talk about that shortly. So refurbishment along these lines would really provide a unique facility. We have a very inclusive stadium, and we think very community focused. And it's important to bear in mind this is an indicative proposal only. I think we've put in a lot of detail, but it is only indicative, and it is very much something we can consult with residents on. And obviously we need to make sure that we actually save the ground first before we can necessarily refurbish it. So we've also looked at doing the work in 3 phases to ensure affordability and to reduce the initial cost, rather than having to find our sum of money up front through doing things like, for instance, selling football stadiums or selling off important assets, as we're now in the status quo solution being urged to do. So the first phase basically amounts to re-roofing of the main stand and the Riverside stand. These stands we are fairly certain are reasonably structurally sound and wouldn't necessarily need to be demolished. Extending the useful life of a stand obviously lowers costs, but it also ensures that things are environmentally quite sound. So that's what we're looking to do within this phase. So repair and refurbishment works to what some of the internals are of the stand. This includes things like a bar, boardroom, and other things as well. So that's something that could be used outside of match days as well, we feel. We also want to make sure the stadium is accessible for those with disabilities. And so both the main and the Riverside stand already have some of these facilities, but those could well be improved in our phase 1. So this is what it looks like. Obviously the roof here has seen sort of better days, but apart from that, structurally, you know, it's reasonably solid, and it's something that we can definitely just look to renovate. I think the key thing as well from a resident's perspective is we're not proposing to increase the profile of the stadium in the round. If anything, we are actually going to be reducing the footprint of the stands, and I'll talk about that at a later stage. Then the Riverside stand, we're looking to do the same thing. Some of these seats have had to have been removed due to dereliction, but obviously we want to restore it more back towards its full capacity. But like I said, the actual profile of the stand, the space that it takes up within the site is not going to change, and it's not going to increase. Again, another view here. So phase 2 is the demolition of the Ballybock end stand and the Drumcondra end stand, and the installation of temporary changing facilities at the Ballybock end. So the construction of this 3-story building, that would provide the majority of the community benefit. Again, going back to what football can provide, obviously football is and in of itself a community benefit. Going to games, watching games, taking part in games, those are all community benefits. But these are things that we want to make sure that other people can access who don't necessarily like football as well. And crucially, I think for a proposal, and I'm sure any football fan would agree, even though most football fans would prefer a four-side enclosed stadium, this is very much a proposal where we are willing to give up that, we think, for the benefit of providing community outreach and providing inclusivity in the way that we're proposing. So this is where we would house the gym, creche, enterprise centre, and various other amenities, as well as seating for VIPs and those with disabilities. So that's what this looks like. Obviously, those seating can be used for football, for fans with disabilities or VIPs. This is some of the internal shots. It might be difficult to see on some of your screens, but the first floor basically is given over to changing rooms, of which there are 4. Obviously, if this is going to be a community facility open to multiple different clubs, it's going to be important that people are able to come and go without being majorly disrupted. So obviously 4 different changing rooms is incredibly important to that, because you can obviously have 2 teams set up and ready to go whilst the others are on the pitch. Then the next level, more community benefit here in terms of a creche, a gym, and also what could be a cafe and potentially match room or hospitality facilities on the day of a match. Then the 3rd floor is enterprise centre and offices. We also have provision for a games room and a few other things as well that we feel could provide good community benefit. So phase 3 is going to be installation of a hybrid pitch. A hybrid pitch replaces some of the blades of grass you'd find in a normal pitch with plastic. And what it does is it provides a high quality surface similar to what you'd see within high quality grass surfaces. So it makes it suitable for professional or semi-professional football, but it also massively increases durability. That's going to be very important, as John said already, if we want to have, for instance, both men and women's teams playing in one facility, but also opening it up to other community teams as well. We also want to construct a new stand at the Ballybock end with a capacity of 840 that'll have catering, toilet facilities, other match day facilities, but most importantly, will also allow the development of an access route across the River Tolka. That's already the subject of a few submissions to the city development plan, which is currently being debated, and we think it's incredibly important to provide, again, a community benefit through the stadium. So this is what it looks like. Obviously, some of the most passionate fans in football usually stand behind the goal because it's the best place to generate an atmosphere. We think that stadium, whilst it's being shrunk more or less from its current profile, is something that's going to enable fans to do that. But also, we're going to look at demolishing the house that is currently on the site, but is at the corner of the site here at the corner of the stadium, and basically creating this runway through. This could be a pedestrianised runway, pedestrianised access route, and it could provide, along with a bridge over to the other side, great permeability and really link those two areas. One of the comments we heard was, you know, Drumcondra and the North Inner City are very close, but it's not always easy to create accessibility between them and the permeability between them. So we think this is the kind of thing that would be able to do that and provide a nice amenity, and also allow access to the River Tolka. That's also the subject of a lot of the action plans around the area, and something I think residents have been looking for quite a while. And we get something that we can provide through this redevelopment, or through this refurbishment. Sorry. So in terms of the costs, and the initial cost we think is reasonably cheap. It's coming in at 1,325,000 excluding VAT, and it's mostly obviously reseeding and re-roofing. Phase 2 is where things get a little more intensive in terms of cost and in terms of what we're looking to do. Obviously, the construction of a 3-story building is pretty significant, and so that's why the second phase costs a lot more. And then finally, we looked at the final phase, installation of a hybrid pitch, and again, the creation and construction of a new stand. It's going to be about approximately the same amount as it's going to take to refurbish 2 others. So the overall cost, look, you know, we think this is really where, and as Una said, you know, some of this stuff we don't really feel you can put a price on the heritage and what Tolka Park offers to the city. At the same time, we know we exist in a context where you know, budgets are being tightened and money is being squeezed. So we feel for this amount, we think that's an incredible deal, and it compares very favorably with what the current costs for daily mount are. Not because we don't necessarily want daily mount to happen, but because we are, in terms of advocating for this case, we're going to be asked about this, and we think that this is a very reasonable answer as to the question of viability, cost, and so forth. How would we fund this? Well, we have a few ideas. Sports capital grants over a number of years could potentially be utilised, along with grants from the Large Scale Sports Infrastructure Fund. The fact that it's on a phased basis would mean that you could move phase by phase, looking to raise funds in each funding or in each phase, and then potentially get the grants from central government, but also the matching funding that you would need. Development levies, we think, could also provide some of the outputs when you consider 5 million of development levies are going to be used to redevelop Tolka Park, or sorry, Dalymount Park. We feel that these could really go a long way in terms of the refurbishment of Tolka. Things like cooperative-based fan investment could also be looked at. If you looked at AFC Wimbledon, who've now returned to the borough of Merton in London, they did that mostly through fan investment, a large part through fan investment, which really allowed them to create a source of funding that they were able to match from other sources as well. Donations from the Irish Immigrant Investor Programme. This is a programme that Meath GAA have used with the renovation of their stadium, and they got a 400k donation that they were then able to match from central government funds as well from that programme. And there's other sources of funding we think could be explored. Certain aspects of community facilities may also generate revenue. Again, you know, we don't want to put a price on everything, but we do want to understand the value of things, and we think that something like this could really provide potentially income, over the years, which could potentially be written down against the costs, obviously, that are being invested, along with, you know, all the other things that we don't think you can always necessarily put a tangible cost on. So an approach of refurbishment of both stadiums rather than new build on one site would really give a higher return in every sense. So what can you do to support us? Firstly, you can support our petition. All this is available at tolkapark.com. We've over 3,500, or we're getting towards 3,500 supporters already on that one. I think it's been up for less than a week, so that's great. The really absolutely key thing though that you can do, because the disposal and rezoning of Tolka Park is a reserved function for Dublin City councillors. It's their responsibility alone, not that of central government, not that of council management. You really need to contact your local DCC councillors and ask them to vote for the retention of Tolka Park. We want to make sure that people that are contacting the local DCC councillors are people from DCC and are from their areas. We want to make sure that there is that good conversation between voters and councillors. I think that's incredibly important. So that's why we also ask, if you don't live in the DCC area, that you contact your TDs. Obviously, there's various priority links that can be quite useful, and it's obviously good to raise awareness, even if you don't live in DCC, but we think that TDs are the more appropriate people to contact in those instances. Obviously, liking and sharing our social media content is something we'd like to ask you to do, as well as purchase merchandise. In terms of the contact, it's very important that you go to savetolkapark.com. There we have templates and tools that you can use to contact your local DCC councillors. And I think on that basis, I'd just like to thank everybody for your attention and turn it back over to Shane.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, John. The full proposal and all of those images are available on savetolkapark.com. So if you do visit the website in your own time, we will be able to see all of those images of the reimagined, refurbished Tolka Park on the website. So moving on, I'd like to now welcome in Enda McHugh. Enda is from the Community Action Tenants Union.
Hi there, thanks for having me. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Fairview Marino Clontarf branch of CATU, the Community Action Tenants Union. We're a group of people fighting primarily for housing rights, but also for a more livable Dublin. And we exist really because in 2008, we had a housing crash in this country. After a decade or more of private interests, private developers, investors, speculators running the show and running roughshod over everything else. And we had years of just these kind of people building what they want, when they want, where they want, with no thought given, no appreciation of what it takes to build sustainable, functional, democratic communities people can really contribute to and feel part of. After that, we had another decade of austerity, where the heart and soul was ripped out of Dublin City. You had things like, arts and culture spaces, recreation, sports, mental health infrastructure, defunded, run down to the wire, just stripped out. And now we have a whole new crisis of affordability with rising rents and rising land prices mean everything's being shut down again, everything's being sold off. And we're repeating the same old mistakes of, sell the family silver basically. And again, we're failing to build communities that people can really live in. We're instead pushing people into co-living type shoeboxes, or people are living in bunk beds in tenements, or they're being pushed out into distant suburbs away from the neighborhoods they grew up in. And the people who are left living in Dublin City, there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go unless you've got deep pockets. There are no public amenities. There's no spaces to be together, to play, to build community. And that's why it's ridiculous to talk about selling off a wonderful amenity such as Tolka Park, which, as Ali was saying, you can't get it back. And you'll never have a really livable community if you just replace that with a load of for-profit development, the same as you have all over the country. So that's why we oppose the sale of Tolka Park, and we fully support the Save Tolka campaign.
And thanks so much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us here at our Save Tolka Park public launch. Next up on the agenda, I'd like to welcome in Elaine Donnelly. Elaine is a local resident in Drumcondra, originally from Marino.
Thank you, Shane. Like you said, I'm a local resident and I've lived my lifetime in Drumcondra, Marino area. And I'm lucky enough to continue to live here, as is my family who live in the local proximity of Tolka Park. I should say I'm not a football fan, but I am really committed to the development of the locality, and I'm really concerned about the implications of the sale of Tolka Park to a private developer, and how that impacts on the current process of community development within Drumcondra. Obviously, this is reflective of wider patterns across the city, across the country, where we're seeing the importance of community be devalued. So I really appreciate that the campaign is grounded in the principle of public use of public land. Obviously, housing supply is a major issue in this city, and we all experience that directly or indirectly. And consequently, there's been a lot of significant developments in the surrounding areas of Tolka Park. So there's been several apartment complexes, there's been well-developed housing enclaves, as somebody called them, developed in the local area. I strongly believe that further concentrated development of apartment complexes by private developers in a scattergun approach while divesting community services is really short-sighted. There's no sense of sustainable community development. There's no sense of a local impact assessment on the local community. I am an aunt of 3 young children who live within 500 metres of Tolka Park, and they attend the local school on Growth Park Road. I can see the huge role and benefit that Tolka Park has played, as it has done throughout my lifetime, and I've seen that in action, and also the huge potential benefit that it could play as outlined in your proposal. I think that's very clear. I think in recent years, and through COVID in particular, urban regeneration through leisure, it has emerged as critical. So with sports programs, sports infrastructure, sports events being really promoted as important in facilitating this. We know all the research tells us that sport has a really positive impact on individual health, but sports engagement and community engagement with sport at all levels, we know has been really crucial in promoting social cohesion, encouraging social connection bonds. So as other speakers have noted, this is a really important issue for our community. I should say that I come at this from a certain perspective, as I'm a mental health social worker. I've worked in mental health services for over a decade now. Day in, day out, I see the direct result of social disconnection and the lack of investment in community services. I also see the huge benefit that amenities like Tolka Park, like going to League of Ireland football on a Friday night, can have for people's mental health, their sense of connection, their well-being. We know that if we want to invest in individual mental health, we have to create supportive environments. And we know all the research and evidence tells us that community sports engagements is really positively correlated with good health and good mental health. Another point I just would make, which I think is nothing short of alarming in terms of what you've raised in your proposal, is the potential for this to negatively and to disadvantage the women's teams. Equitable participation of women in sports is a major issue. And I would hope that our locally elected officials would be equally concerned about this issue in 2021, particularly as it's not in line with our national sports policy, nor our national strategy for women and girls. So that's a major issue, which I think, it really needs to be taken up by our local DCC councillors. Just on a final point, I would say, I think it speaks volumes about what matters and who matters when people argue that it's aspirational to have 2 sports facilities within a densely populated urban area with limited green space. And I think this campaign is an opportunity to consider and to reassert what matters and who matters for the betterment of the local community into the future.
Elaine, thank you so much. Really appreciate your contribution there. Just driving on with things now, I'd like to welcome in, as I mentioned at the start, we're delighted to have official letters of support from Drumcondra AFC and indeed Home Farm. And I'd like to welcome the Honorary Secretary of Home Farm, Mr. Brendan Menton.
Thank you, Shane. Home Farm have been involved in the Drumcondra area for 93 years now, dating back to 1928. And in fact, we've had a number of close connections with Richmond Road. The club originated as an amalgamation of 2 streets team, one which was Home Farm Road, but the other in fact was Richmond Road. And maybe a closer connection was that we were the owners of Tolka Park for 17 years between 1972 and 1989. And I'd like to come back to that point at the end. One of the biggest problems we face as a football club operating in Drumcondra is the lack of facilities for playing for football. We're operating more than 30 teams in the current season, both for boys, women, men, girls. And we actually are renting maybe up to 6 facilities for training for our teams, most of which are outside the Drumcondra area. And I think that demonstrates the shortage of recreation facilities in the Drumcondra area. And we're also acutely aware of the lack of community facilities in the area. And that's another major issue. As a club, I think we'd like to commend the campaign for their very imaginative proposal for the redevelopment of Tolka Park. I think if you can achieve this, you're going to convert the stadium from a facility that was used occasionally for football into a facility that has frequent use for recreation facilities and for a lot of different community activities. It couldn't become a centre for the community in many different ways. And particularly the proposal that the pitch would be reconfigured so it would have up to 30 hours usage per week, and then all the purpose-built, designed community facilities for a range of different activities. I think this is really imaginative and really positive proposal for Tolka Park. The other point I'd like to make is that I'm sure that when redeveloped, this project, a redeveloped Tolka Park, would have a lifespan of 30 years, if not 40 years or even more. And I've no doubt that the social return from the kind of investment that's proposed would be immense. And I think this is the previous speaker made this point. And a number of speakers made this point. You cannot quantify the benefit, the social benefit of having these kind of facilities. Then just to finish, coming back to Tolka Park and Home Farm's involvement in Tolka Park in the 70s and 80s. When we vacated Tolka Park in 1989, it was our firm understanding as a club that the stadium would continue as a football facility. So again, Shane, thank you for the opportunity of addressing the webinar, and we'll support the campaign as best we can. And again, thank you.
Appreciate it. No, thank you, Brendan. Really appreciate it. Absolute gentleman. Thanks so much for your contribution. Sticking on the lines of football and local clubs that are supporting the Save Tolka Park campaign, I'd like to welcome in Drumcondra AFC chairperson, Mr. Frank Conley.
Hi, Shane. Thanks very much for the invite this evening. In some ways, Brendan kind of stole my thunder with some of the points he made. But again, it's no harm in re-emphasising the fact that ourselves, Drumcondra, we fully support the campaign and we fully endorse the campaign. And because of our own connections with Tolka Park and our own connections with the name of Drumcondra and carrying on the name of Drumcondra in football in the area, obviously we want to get 100% behind it. Drums played in Tolka Park as well, you know, for just shy of 50 years. And then after the lull and the time when Home Farm Drumcondra were there, a schoolboy club was restarted in the early 80s. And for the last 40 years, we've slowly grown within the area to the point where we now have 20 schoolboy teams and 3 adult senior teams. And just as well to echo what Brendan was saying in terms of the dearth of facilities, we have a situation where, although we are based across the road from Tolka Park and we have our small-sided games there on Clontarf Park every weekend and during the week, we actually have no 11-side pitch in the Drumcondra area at all. All our pitches are from Albert College and further out. Again, like Home Farm, like Brendan, we have to hire loads and loads of facilities right through the winter to train teams in various areas way outside Drumcondra. So the idea of having something local within the community that would be inclusive for all clubs and for all people involved in football right in the area that we could share and use together is an absolutely tremendous idea. Obviously, we may all have different sort of concepts of what it will eventually look like, but your blueprint is a brilliant starting point. And I have to commend the committee for the work they've done, the professionalism of it, the sincerity of it, and as well, the inclusivity of it, which I think is absolutely key to this being a goer further down the line. So obviously, we wish you all the best going forward. We will help out in any way we can. And you know where we are. Okay.
Thanks so much, Frank. You know, really appreciate those kind words, and they certainly will do wonders to the campaign, because, as I say, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And over the next few weeks and few months, hopefully, we can all link together within the community, within Drumcondra, for the benefit of Tolka Park and for the benefit of the area, for the benefit of the surrounding communities. So coming full circle, if we kind of tip back to the cultural and society end of things, I'd like to welcome a joint contribution from Pam Connolly of the Pillow Queens and David Balfe from For Those I Love.
I just want to say thanks a million for asking me to talk, and I'm just going to start us off, and then I'm going to pass us over to the wonderful David Balfe. So my relationship with Tolka Park is a relatively new one, especially in comparison to a lot of people who are dyed-in-the-wool fans, I'm sure. But its impact on me has been came about quite hard and fast, and it's really enveloped me in a way that I haven't experienced myself, along with a lot of other people, including Dave, kind of found our way into the club after the death of our friend Paul Curran. And I know I treated Tolka as a church or like a graveside to visit, and it was a place that we, as a group of friends, were able to kind of let loose and honor Paul's memory, and also try to relive the joy that Tolka gave him and Shells gave him. That's what it could have stayed. It could have stayed like that for me anyway. It could have stayed as a monument. It could have been something that I would use to remember someone that I loved. But it changed for me, and I ended up kind of becoming a wee bit entangled into the club, and it was a place where I could still go and honour Paul's passion, but it's where I grew my own passion for the club and like, to be honest, for the game itself. What I'm describing is probably not like new for a lot of people who grew up in the club, and I'm quite jealous of that because I didn't have that. But it's strange to find yourself in a community so intrinsically linked with a community, and at this point of life. And I count myself lucky to be experienced this now, even though it's a little bit later in the game. During the time that I've been involved in the club, the idea of the move has been kind of looming over, but I would usually just put it on the long finger because I assumed that it wasn't going to happen. And it's not until recently that I'd have to kind of critically engage with it. And when I did, it was the idea of having to cherish every opportunity that you would be in Tolka. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to preserve those memories. I wanted to continue making them, and I want to continue sharing it with people, because I try to kind of share Tolka and Shells with as many people as I can, and that's probably because when Paul was with us, he would encourage me to go to games, but I never did, and I do kick myself every day for doing that. But I understand him now, because Shells feels like it's running through my blood, and Tolka feels like my home, and it's a place that I don't want to gatekeep. I want to be able to share it with people, because when you're there and you witness the impact and the what it does to the community and the endless potential that it has to give to the community, you can't imagine it leaving. And when one of my initial concerns anyway about the idea of the move was the impact that it would have on the women's teams, and unfortunately that's been echoed in the proposal, and just like Elaine said, it's kind of retroactive for women's sports in general. And it doesn't seem fair that this development would see the women's teams having to take a step back and having to compromise at a time when we should be bolstering the sport. And it's not good for Shells, and it's not good for the Irish football in general, I don't think. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. As an artist, I've become quite numb to the destruction of cultural spaces and public amenities in Dublin. particularly those that serve working class communities, and they're normally taken over by places that are inaccessible facilities that don't serve the people. And I think we've become quite complacent, and we've become a little bit pessimistic when it comes to striving for a better city. And a lot of the discourse around the Save Tolka Park campaign, I've noticed anyway, that it's rather resigned. It's, you know, it would be great, but it's never going to happen. And I think our expectations for a positive renewal of the city is at an all-time low. And it's when places like Tolka, absolute gems in the city, that the beating heart of the city, are at their most vulnerable. And this is the time that we should be up in arms and making sure that we're saving these places, because when they're gone, they're gone. And that's been said throughout the whole talk, is when it's gone, there's no bringing it back. And the city at the moment is eating itself from the inside. And we are very lucky to have a grassroots organisation like Save Tolka Park come to the forefront and push for, you know, for us to keep our home. But they're not just asking, you know, it to not be taken away from it, but they're asking, why can't we do more? Why can't this be more for the community? Why can't we have this and make it better? And I don't want Tolka to be something that is a distant memory. I don't want to have to live on in our memories. I don't want it to have to live on in my art, and I don't want to have to live on in Paul's art or Dave's art. I want it to continue to inspire, but I also want it to open its doors wider for the people of the city. So that's me, and I'm gonna hand it over to Dave Balfe, who's probably gonna say something fucking profound. Maybe.
I was probably just planning to echo Pamela a little bit. You know, a lot of our experiences are very, very similar. We we grew up together in the same place and have all the same friends. So yeah, I don't know, on Tolka, like it was hard thinking about Tolka. You know, Tolka seems to be like this living museum. You know, it's somewhere where like history is stored and it's held, and it comes back to life every time you walk in the turnstiles, and you feel all of that history rush back into your memories again. And then you add more to it that day as, you know, you watch the Reds, and it's, yeah, very special blend of like, you know, misery and glory. I think we're all well used to that. And that kind of history is a very hard thing to distill because it's so personal to each person. You know, you go in, you get your stub ripped by Tosh, and every week he's going to my mate Robbie like, how's your dad? And I don't think Tosh has ever met Robbie's dad, but you know, it's there, it's the heart of it. Because like the ground of Tolka stands as a place that kind of connects generations of people. It's like friends, communities, families. Like so many people still so many people still breathe their granddad or their dad or their auntie into their lungs every time they walk in there, because that's the grounds where their closest bonds have been shaped, you know? Yeah, like we're a very vulnerable but stoic group, like us as Dubliners, and I don't know how often hugs and love and embracing each other fit into our lives when we are growing up, or maybe even now for some of us. But I do know that in Tolka, yeah, that was the grounds for some of those rare moments over the years, and we still see that. Like we still see that now. Yeah, like to echo Pam, for me, for Pam, Tolka is that place for us to connect with the memory of our best mate, you know, who passed a couple of years ago. And it's where we stood about a month after he passed, and we laid his ash down right in the center. And it'll always be that, and I can't let go of Tolka for that reason. And I know so many other people have had that same experience with family and friends, but it is also that place where you still feel like he's still alive and he's still tackling Gav White down the stairs every time Fowler nets one. And up here, when I'm in Tolka, he's still singing about Philly Hughes, and I don't know why. But yeah, Tolka is this like living and breathing place. And if a developer buys its steel and its stone, I don't think it'll ever buy its soul. So yeah, Save Tolka Park. Thanks for letting us speak, Shane.
No problem at all, Dave. Genuine, emotional, and very passionate tributes there, and sentiments by Dave and Pam. So thank you so much. So that is where our launch and our presentation ends. We will open the Q&A session, but I do want to genuinely thank firstly Pam and Dave for such an emotional contribution. Brendan Menton and Frank Connolly from the local football clubs in the area, Enda McHugh and Elaine Donnelly for the local views of the area as well. And indeed Eamon Dunphy and Una Mullally. Una, unfortunately, as I say, couldn't be with us this evening, but does send on her regards. And indeed to John and Lee for the presentation.